Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's Ellechat on honing in on a distinct style for your brand. I'm really excited to see so many of you tuning in live today and already saying hi in the comments. It looks like you all are tuning in from all over the world today. Netherlands, England, Chicago, Canada. This is awesome. So if you haven't already told us where you're joining in from, go ahead and leave that in the comments. Also, are there any first-time Ellechat viewers tuning in today or tuning in live today? Yes, awesome, great. So glad to see you all. Hi, Kim, thanks for joining in. And Dawn, Eunice, Tina, Leanne, this is awesome. Great. Well, I'm so glad that you all are tuning in live today. I'm really excited to have Kadie Smith joining me, a friend and graphic designer who has a really great style, and so I immediately thought of her when this topic came up. We've been doing the brand challenge. This is the first week of the Ellen Company brand challenge. I would love to know if any of you tuning in have been taking part in that challenge too. It's a 4-week, for those of you who are unfamiliar with it, it's a 4-week challenge to help you create a one-of-a-kind brand. It walks you through step by step exactly how to create a brand from the ground up. So it's been really fun, but I found that people tend to struggle with making their brand look different from what's already been out there, from all the other businesses in your industry. And so I'm really excited about today's topic. But because there's so many of you tuning in live for the first time this week, I want to show you around the screen a little bit. It's pretty simple. Comments, it looks like a lot of you all have already found that. Feel free to say hello, like I said. And then underneath the window, there's a questions and topics section, and that's where you can ask questions. A cool thing about Crowdcast too is that you can vote questions up. So if you really want to see a question answered, go ahead and give it a vote. And Kadie and I at the end will answer these questions in order of the number of votes. We'll try to leave about 15 to 20 minutes. But I'm going to go ahead and invite Kadie on, and we'll just jump right in. 1 second. Awesome. While she is joining in, I want to hear from you all what your biggest struggle has been in creating a one-of-a-kind brand. What is your biggest hang-up? If you could type that in the comments while we're waiting on Kadie, that would be awesome. There she is. Hey there. Thank you for joining me today.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so tell us a little bit about yourself. How did you get started in graphic design?
So long time.
Starting right out the gate.
I actually switched schools for high school when I was a lot younger, and there was an obligatory art class before you graduated, and my mom's brilliant idea at the time was that I was going to really struggle with the transition, and she wanted me to take an art class to express myself as I kind of got familiar with a new school, which is hilarious.
That is funny.
That I totally clicked with it and loved it, and ended up actually shadowing at a branding agency for career day in high school and was just sold. And so I went to Auburn. I actually did not want to do branding. I was like, I am not into that. That's not my thing. It's too corporate. I was trying to decide whether or not to be an English major or graphic design. It's like, perfect, publication. I'll do both and then go into magazines.
Right.
And I moved out to Dallas and got a job as a layout designer at an agency, and just very quickly was not the right fit. And I went so far as to just think I wanted to abandon design altogether, just start over, just scratch it, new career.
I can totally relate to that.
Yeah, and so I started freelancing as a way to stay creative and see if it was even something I wanted to do with my life. And it snowballed, and I started waking up at 4:30 in the morning and working with a few clients, and had no social life and loved it, and had never felt more inspired or excited and feeling in control, and like I could explore lots of different things and meet lots of people. And then the opportunity came where I just blindly jumped in and just hustled to make it happen.
That is awesome. Yeah. So how long ago was that?
We're coming up on 3 years. So March 1st, 3 years ago is when I just took the leap. So it's exciting.
Yeah, and then as of today, officially, Drop Cap Design is started. So you're new. So you decided to rebrand recently. Tell us more about that.
Yeah. So we went completely from the ground up rebrand. I started Design by Kadie, which is what it was before, actually as a student at Auburn. It was part of a student project to brand yourself in your freelance design.
We had that too, yeah.
Yeah, hated the process. I was like, this is so hard. I hate doing it for myself. I'll never do this again. I'm so glad it's a student project. Which is hilarious because it turned into a full-time business and I had no plans for that when I originally did it. But I actually struggled with what a lot of people struggle with when they start businesses is that they just tie their entire identity and self-worth into their business. And I had the hardest time. I was a major workaholic. I was just like all the time, just constantly doing new things. And every time anyone would ask me how I was or what my goals were, they were just all business related. Like it was just like, I just did not separate the two at all. And it was about this time last year that I started thinking I really need to create some separation between how I view myself as a person and my business so that if for whatever reason one day this were to crash, I wouldn't just completely sink into a hole.
Right.
And I started bringing on other designers, starting with Allie, who's, I call her my other designer, she's more of a business partner anyways. But it was just such a collaborative effort between the two of us that my name, I just wanted to take it out just to completely transition into a new phase where it was more a partnership and it was more team focused. And I just felt like the longer my name was in it, the more it was holding us back from a lot of opportunities. And that's not the case for everybody. A lot of people like experience a ton of growth when their name's still in the business, but for us, it just felt like it was just hindering a lot of opportunities and creating a lot of confusion. So I pulled back from my editorial roots as a student, and drop cap is actually a typography term, which is like that first, usually it's one letter, but it's at the beginning of a story. And I loved drop cap, the design of drop cap. So just now it's like kind of hard to say that in a phrase without saying hard.
Right.
But
drop cap.
And wanted to pull it in because we have some editorial clients where we do mainly branding, and I felt like that whole idea, it just like sets the stage for the tone of the story, and sometimes it's really illustrative, and we kind of felt like that's our philosophy on branding, is that it's really setting a stage for a story to develop. And there was just such a relationship between a drop cap's role in editorial layout and then its symbolism and branding, and it just all tied together, and suddenly it, like the whole process was so much easier after that point. So
yeah, I love it. And the website went live an hour ago?
Yeah.
Is that right?
So I'm sure there's some mistakes on there, so if anyone goes to look and finds any funky stuff on there, let me know.
It's beautiful. You should totally check it out. If someone oh, can you all see me and hear me okay? It looks like someone might be having trouble. You might need to refresh your window too. But it looks like you can see and hear Kadie okay, which is good. Awesome. So, and I love hearing the story behind your name too, because I feel like that's so important, is to put the thought and intention into why you're naming your business, what you're naming your business. That's a huge part of your brand. And it's often very difficult to land on that perfect name. Yeah.
I think it took years to finally find something.
Yeah, and it usually comes at the most random time when you're driving in the car or talking to someone, or I don't know. So yeah, but that's awesome. So on the topic of a brand as being setting the stage for that story, I think branding is a term that is often thrown around, and not many people can pinpoint exactly what it is. So how would you define the term brand?
And that's so funny that that you mentioned that too, because I was talking with someone the other day. It's like, I feel like the term personal branding is like ruining branding for what it is, because people like don't know what that term means anymore. But basically branding is just how you're perceived by, or a brand is the perception that someone has on a business. But branding is influencing that perception. And I kind of relate it because it can get tricky with those terms, kind of knowing that's really abstract, but it's kind of like a college game day. So I always say, like, you wear your team colors so that people know you're on the same team. Like, it's an identifier. So the process of branding is kind of letting people know, like, I'm one of you, or like you're in kind of my circle, you're who I service. And it's just like a subconscious, really immediate way to identify who you are and who you're trying to work with. That eliminates a lot of that like discovery. It's kind of more instant when you go through the proper process of branding.
Right. I love that, team colors. I haven't heard that analogy, but it's so true. And it should be just like sports teams, polarizing. People should either love your brand or really not be attracted by it if they're not your potential client or customer.
Totally.
So I love that.
People are like, I want it to be appeal to everybody. And then I'm like, ugh. You're not going to have like those loyal, diehard people when it's just a wash.
Right.
But
yeah. It's the same with, like, I always go back to this analogy of Kate Spade and ESPN. Like, Kate Spade is very classic, feminine. Men are not going to be attracted to the Kate Spade brand. But, and even some women aren't attracted to it, and that's okay. It's not trying to appeal to everyone. But ESPN, they have that bold font. It's slightly italicized. It's more masculine. And they're two totally different audiences, and you can tell by their brand. So that's so.
Doing that, how much more often you get to work with people who really value what you do and understand where you're coming from, and it's less frustrating. It's like natural interaction.
Yes. And I feel like you said, loyalty is built around a brand so much more when it isn't trying to appeal to absolutely everything.
Totally.
So with that being said, a lot of people have a tendency to look at everything else that's being done in the industry, kind of see what other businesses are doing and try to emulate that style for their own brand. And what happens is it starts to become boring. And a huge benefit of branding is differentiating yourself. So what benefits would you say come from honing in on an aesthetic or a distinct style for your brand?
Yeah, totally. I feel like, especially having gone through the process recently myself, it's given me so much more empathy towards the process of branding. And also walking a lot of clients through it. But there is this tendency to feel like you want to be validated as professional, looking like your competitors, which ends up defeating the purpose. You might like feel professional, but you're not really making a mark.
Right.
But as consumers, when we see options, like when I go to shop, I'm looking for different products or brands that represent how I view myself. So if everything looks the same, it takes out that joy of customization. Like, I want to be able to purchase something that feels tailor-made to me, that is so part of how I view myself and what I value, that it becomes like an extension of me.
Right.
There are certain things that they're just standard, and it kind of takes the joy out of it. So part of distinguishing is really allowing your customer to feel like, yes, like this person gets me. This is exactly who I need to be with. It creates like this immediate resonance. And it just also allows the business owner to really tailor who their audience is, so that they're saying things to an audience that's really receptive to that message. So it's definitely a process of like weeding out. And if you're not distinct and communicating who you are and where you're coming from that's different from your competitors, then no one's going to really feel this like personal connection to you or your business. It's just going to feel like one more thing,
Yeah. And that leads to recognition and being memorable. I feel like the brands that aren't afraid to step outside of the box of what everyone else is doing, those are the brands that I'm going to remember and get excited to see content from and visit often. But the brands that blend in are easily forgettable. It's, which one was that? It looked like this. You don't remember the name as much. You just.
So true. And especially like for you and I, there are so many online brand designers. I feel like I find 20 new ones every single day.
Yeah.
So it's like for photographers or really anyone in creative or online business now, there's just so much competition. And even among a really saturated market, there are so many people who come on day one and just stand out because they're coming in with a completely new story or look, and they're just owning it, and everyone pays attention.
It is. It does. It stops you in your tracks.
Yeah.
So what are some examples of brands that stick out to you or do a really good job of honing in on their own aesthetic?
Yeah. So my first and favorite is Anthropologie. And part of that is when I was in high school, or at the very end of high school, early college, I actually worked for Anthropologie. And when they took me through their training, like day one, they introduce you to the Anthro woman, which is their target customer. And it's insane. There's actually been articles written about it. One's called The Sophisticated Sell, if anyone wants to read about it later. But this lady is described in so much detail, and it influences every single decision Anthropologie makes, from what they buy to the scents that they have from the store. Like there's a whole scent story that's going on as you walk through the store, and like this whole experience of her life and her inspirations and travels is being revealed as you go through the store. And it becomes so much more than just a boutique. It becomes like this
experience.
Yeah, and it's crazy how this lady, I mean, they describe her, she even has like a name, but so many women identify with different parts of her character, and they see themselves in different components of her life, that it creates this massive loyalty with really diverse audience. I think a lot of people, wonder, well, what's going to happen if I get really specific? I'm going to lose a ton of people. But it's just people resonate with different components of that type. But I think Anthropologie does a phenomenal job with identifying who their customer is and creating an experience around her. Another one.
Love that because, and I hear a little bit of an echo, Kadie. I don't know if people can hear it on their end. I'm going to put in my headphones really quick just to make sure. And if you have any nearby, that might be helpful too. Now I don't hear it though. Can you all hear an echo? Oh, well, this is the thing about it being live, is that it just stopped. Gone now. Okay, awesome. Perfect. But I'm glad that you said that about creating a profile, because that's the action step for the brand challenge today, is to create a profile, because so many people don't understand that branding isn't about putting yourself on display and, all about your interests and your favorite colors and your favorite fonts and what you like. The point of branding is to attract that ideal client, to repel or attract someone. And so in order to understand who that ideal client is, it's helpful to do a profile, and it's helpful to get to know them, just like the Anthropologie
I actually
woman.
had a client who gave me this idea, and I wish I thought of it myself. That goes along with that. But when she went through our brand Sketchpad, she actually created a Pinterest board under the name of her audience and went through and pinned things that person would be interested in, like from their perspective. And it totally changed how she approached the project. And I thought it was brilliant. But
that is so smart, especially with Pinterest boards, because you pin things that mimic how you want your brand to see, to look, to feel, but to pin it from their perspective.
like every time she made a social media post or content and thought, is this person, would they be pinning it or would they be interested in that? It was cool.
So smart. I love that. Anthropology is such a great example too, because it's not, you can see their brand in every sense, like smell, taste. Well, I don't know so much about that one, but the whole experience, also the way that they sound. So not only the music they're playing, but their tone that they use on social media and in all of their marketing material. It's that whole experience. That's a good one.
And if anyone is curious about how, like, what actually goes into it, the sophisticated sell, that article nails it. It's really cool.
Marissa shared it in the comments.
Oh, perfect.
So
Perfect. Another one, I know you asked me for two, and another one that occurred to me that is brilliant, and it's a love it or hate it, because I'm going to go back, but Kinfolk actually did a phenomenal job branding in the editorial publication world. And it's so crazy now. People will even say, like, I want a Kinfolk wedding, or I want a Kinfolk. And it applies, like, everyone knows it's neutral tones, white space, minimal typography. Like, it's a style, and it's so recognizable. But they came into the game when it was either a lot of really elaborate coffee table books or glossy magazines. And they came in this publication that had tons of white space, and it was just so distinct and so different. But they found a way to make their brand not just about their product, which I thought was crazy. Like, it went out to this entire lifestyle, and it's now people, you know, it's not even just about the magazine, it's about the company as a whole. And I've gotten a ton of inspiration just from how they developed that. It's so successful.
Yeah, that's a really great example. You know that you have hit the nail on the head with your brand if people are trying to emulate it and kind of use it as a verb almost. That is awesome. I love that. Those are two really good examples. So now taking it, his Anthropology, Kinfolk, they're both bigger brands. And so when people step back to brand for themselves, they can get overwhelmed with how to create that distinct look or that distinct style. So with so many different brands out there, how do you go about creating a distinct look for your clients? What does that look like? What goes into that process?
Yeah, so our process is interesting. It's about half research and then half designing. So we have this thing called the brand scratch pad, and it's in our discovery phase, and every client goes through it for I think 6 to 8 weeks before they start, depending on when their start date is. And it goes through their whole story, like their personality, why they started, how they got to where they are, what their dream scenario looks like, who they enjoy being around. And it's just this almost let's be best friends ASAP so I can get to know everything about you. But we go through trying to understand this person to where we feel like we could make decisions for them, knowing their whole history and background. And we try to pull a lot of symbolism. So it's easy to get, especially a lot of clients will send us inspiration and they're inspired by trends. And for good reason, because trends are here and trends capture a lot of attention. But we take those trends and we table them for a second for style, but we pull, we have this list of words that have visual symbols. So whether they have a historical reference to their trade, or they have a cultural thing about where they're from or who they're trying to work with. And we go through and we try to just dig and dig and dig and dig and dig until we have 20 or 25 visual cues. Okay, these could translate either into shapes or patterns or color or something. And then that way, once we pull the style and the trend back in, the whole design, it's not even about the design anymore. It's about what every single element represents as part of the story. And then what's fun is then Allie and I, before we show the client, we pitch it to each other. So I have to explain why I did something and how it relates back to their story. And if it like isn't really, it's kind of like a stretch, like she'll for sure call me on it. Like it doesn't fly.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I love that, because I feel like that's what a lot of brands miss, especially for people who aren't designers, who are trying to create their own brand. It's going after what looks pretty and what's aesthetically pleasing to them, instead of taking it one step back and thinking, what is the point of this? What does this mean? Why am I making these decisions? And being able to have explanations for why they made certain design choices.
Those styles and trends, that's all an execution. That's like at the very end.
Right.
But if we don't do the first part, then it's just going to look like everything else.
Right. I love that. And then once it passes what is your business partner's name again? Allie.
Yeah.
Yes, that's what I thought, but then it didn't seem right in my head. Allie, if it passes with her and vice versa, then you present it to the client. Is that right?
So we go through, tons of concepts, and we pitch back and forth, and we go through lots of rounds until we get two that we're like, okay, like these are both super solid. Like either one of these is going to work. And we've totally hashed it out. Like, okay, does this have a lot of flexibility? Like, would this one actually work with packaging or on social media? And we start to kind of play with the application before we pitch it. And then we end up pitching something that like actually isn't going to go very far. But then once we pitch it, then we collaborate with the brand to like make them feel comfortable, make sure we're accurately representing parts of their story visually, like especially if there's like a cultural reference that we're like really getting that cultural component right. Or like for instance, right now we're working with a tea shop, and she's given me all these materials on tea processing and plants in Japanese tea gardens, and you know it's this huge process. I have like 2 books on how to make tea right now.
Oh my.
But once we go to her, I'm like, okay, so like if you get like a major tea connoisseur in your shop, like is this accurate? Like are these illustrations, you know, accurate to it? So we kind of go through that, and then we develop it so that they can see what it's going to look like as a whole. But yeah, it's definitely more than a logo. It's more of like a visual system. So
I'm so glad you said that. You're saying so much of what I'm saying in this brand challenge. It's perfect. It's like we planned it or something.
But yeah, because a lot of the times, like, it's funny, Allie and I had this conversation like 2 months ago where she was like, I feel like people come to us and they're wanting just a logo, like a primary logo. And we go through that whole process, but what we know is what they're going to get the most use out of is like this one pattern or like this one color palette or something that's really going to be a game changer. And we really need to spend the most time there. But it's to tell a client, like, okay, your logo is important, but like for your specific instance, like this part of the system is what I really want you to pay attention to. And it's how it all works together.
Yeah, I love that you said system, because that's the word in the upcoming weeks. I've already written the content. They haven't seen it yet. But what's to come is how that brand really is a system where you have all these components. You have the colors, you have the fonts, you have icons, you have all of these different things. And so if you build that out ahead of time, it's so much easier to create blog post graphics. It's so much easier to create all kinds of different collateral because you just pull the parts of the system. It's like an equation or something, a math equation. This plus this.
It goes like this. And it's life is so much easier.
It is. It is so much easier. And that keeps you, too, from switching things up all the time, because I think part of that distinct aesthetic and style is just consistency. It may seem boring to you to use the same fonts over and over again and the same colors over and over again, but that's what creates that recognition is the consistency. So.
It really does. I even was guilty of it when I first started. So my first year of freelancing, I switched, and nobody really would even notice. I would switch between like Pazlon and Garamond and Baskerville like all the time because I couldn't decide. They're all serif fonts and they're all so similar.
Right.
But like 2 years ago, I landed on one. I was like, no, this is like, if I'm going to be a brand designer, like I cannot break the rules myself. It's crazy how much easier it is for me to feel like, okay, yeah, this is right. Whereas in the past, I'd be like, I can't decide if this feels like me or not. And it was because I had too many, like, I just said, like, anything goes. And then everything feels like it's like being paralyzed.
Right. And I feel like it's better because there is an experimentation phase, especially when you're DIYing your own brand, where you're like, what fonts can I use? But it is so good to stay consistent and then eventually work with a designer or go through a rebranding process if you are a designer and then make those updates. But I've been guilty of those things too, Kadie. As a designer, I feel like it's super hard too because you have the ability to switch things up all the time.
Well, I know it's going to even notice that they are.
Yeah.
It's you can tell.
Yes. So on that note, because there are probably a lot of people tuning in who are creatives and designers who are working with a bunch of different brands. So whether you are a florist or a wedding planner or a designer, you're working with a bunch of different styles. So for me, all of my brands are going to look different that I design. But when I go to create my own brand, it's really difficult. How do you choose colors? How do you appeal to people with different styles? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Am I making any sense? So it's always hard in that sense to create your own brand. So, and you just went through this with Drop Cap Design and the branding process. So what did that look like for you specifically? How did you create a distinct brand when you're working with so many brands all the time as a designer?
Yeah, and this is where it's interesting because I do think that brands that lead with their target client are more successful. But when it comes to really honing in on the ideas, that's where you come in, like you as a business owner. Because at the end of the day, you have to be the one that maintains it. And I, for the longest time, would do like such a simple look that could just be going in so many different directions. And I would show how versatile it was by using a lot of work I did for clients and showing everything. And I felt like, okay, well, I'm not going to be legitimate unless I show every single project and how I work with every single industry and all of those things. It started to become, for me, confusing on how to maintain it creatively. And I started to feel really uninspired because I felt like there wasn't any structure. So then I started coming in and being like, okay, so yeah, I work with a lot of different brands, but at the end of the day, the thing that's consistent is my perspective on design, and Allie and Hector and all of the other contractors that we work with. And what drew all of us together is this really natural minimalism, which I know is like a word that goes everywhere, but it's really like the mindset of editing. And a lot of that came back from my background in editorial, in just storytelling. Like I wanted it to be a framework, like a like for a magazine, you create a template and a framework that's recognizable, but it fits the content that's going to go into it. And so while I wanted there to be some structure in what we showed to create a lot of consistency, especially online, like I do it a lot through color. So I'll try to show apply it to a lot of different things to keep the color the same. And I could have gone in a different direction where I kept the style the same and showed all these different colors. So there's a lot of different ways. I think it's almost like, it's kind of like science class in high school where you keep one variable the same and kind of change some other things. And that pillar really helps you maintain brand consistency even when you're really wanting to show versatility or promote your clients. I mean, there are some clients I work with who have crazy loud colors and like a lot of vibrancy and energy, and our brand's just a little bit quieter. And but I still want to promote them, but I just sometimes find like, okay, what's the best like application? Like how does their brand fit into like our philosophy on design and create a stronger story? I'm trying to think of like another example of kind of how that's played out.
I can say from my experience when I was approaching my brand, I know I can try to work with a bunch of different industries, and I know a lot of designers who like to mix that up all the time. I really like creative small businesses, and usually I'm branding for female entrepreneurs. That's not always the case, but that's who gravitates toward my more feminine, colorful style. So when I was branding Ellen Company, I knew that I wanted a black and white, simple logo that would be sort of timeless, and I love a good ampersand. So that was already in my head. And I kept that simple so that the colors of my branding projects and, that would pop. So keeping that kind of as my variable that doesn't change, or I guess that's not a variable, my constant, and then my variables are the colors of my blog post images and that sort of thing.
Yeah, all of your imagery is like very like illuminated. Like there's a lot of light. There's a lot of color, but it's not necessarily like bold, vibrant. It's more of like clean. Yeah, pops of really clean color. And you kept that so consistent, even though the women that you work with range from so many different actual businesses. But it's almost like a Kate example where so many different women use it, but it's still the same look.
Right. And the same goes for you, in that I always know it's one of your designs because it is more minimal. And with what you share on Instagram, especially, you have the neutral tones, pops of green, like just like your workspace right now. It's so on brand. And so I think that's important to keep in mind, honing in on your aesthetic as a designer or as a creative, and showing that off in your brand.
I mean, years ago, it's all always been minimal, but through life experience, like it shifts a little bit. And, when I first started creating brand identities, there are so many rules, and I would keep it so structured that it can be stifling. That's like that whole idea of a system, is it allows you to shift slightly in one direction or another as your business grows. And it's going through the rebranding process just was very eye-opening and understanding a lot more about how it feels on the other side.
Yeah. And also what I just popped in my mind too, but when you're working with clients, do you ever ask them, I'm sure when you're doing that whole discovery phase and research, you really find out what makes them different from others in their industry and trying to highlight that through the brand, because I feel like that's what makes brands distinct. I don't know if you've heard of Kimra Luna, but she's a business strategist, online marketer, has bright blue hair. And so her brand is just kind of wild, and I don't know, but it goes from her blue hair to it just sweeps across her website and everything that she does. It's just consistent. It's kind of fun. It goes to show she doesn't take herself too seriously. And so that kind of makes her different, and she's just taken off with it through her. So do you find, are you tracking with me? Am I making any sense? Do I need more coffee today? Okay, good.
Yeah, and I won't lie. Sometimes it's hard. Sometimes there's a lot of vulnerability that comes in honestly answering a lot of those questions, and it doesn't always happen the first time. So sometimes we'll have a new client who, for whatever reason, gives us really generic answers, and it's hard to pull something distinct. And we have to go back and say, like, can you go a little, dig a little deeper on this part, or pull a little more out of this story, because we need to get to that heart, because everyone has a unique factor. It's just sometimes people don't know how to share it, or they don't know what is interesting about them. So there's a relationship. It's funny. It's almost like, I tell some people, it's almost like half designer, half therapist. Because you have to kind of it gets to this point where, they're like very much sharing their life story and like things that have really impacted them, or reasons why they feel very passionate about what they do. And so we try really hard, and it's a constant learning experience to create this atmosphere that's really like safe and trusting, so that they feel like they can really honestly show us who they are and kind of put themselves out on the line, so that we can then create a brand out of it. But yeah, it takes, sometimes it's a process of really pulling a story out if it's not coming out the first time.
Yeah, I know a brand designer. I think it's Jen Olmsted. I love her work too. She invites her client over, and usually a spouse or a friend that knows them really well, and she'll interview them to find out more about, pick up on things that people might not say about themselves, or brag on them because they probably won't brag on themselves. And it's just really interesting to start pulling out those bits and pieces. And try to incorporate them in a brand.
Totally.
I know for one of my clients, she had 7 children.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, 7 children. And she took photos of families. Family was really important to her. And so we had 7 green dots at the bottom of her logo. And it gave her a cool story to tell. Or, if someone asked her about that, or some people may have thought it was just a design detail, but it's little things like that I feel like go a long way in the branding process.
Yeah, I feel like it's such a success if at the end they're like, oh my gosh, this feels so much like me. Like, this is what I would have designed for myself if I had known how to design. And this, like, you can see this confidence. And that's the exciting part, is when we dig really deep and keep going back, even though I know they're ready to get into color palettes, like I know they're really wanting to see design, going back and really landing the story, by the end, it's really exciting.
Yeah, and especially when it represents them well and also appeals to their ideal client. It's like, oh, it comes together.
All of a sudden, like we hand it over, and they're like, now I'm like nervous because I have this thing that feels so much like me, and it's talking to all my favorite people. Like, what do I do with it? Like, can I do this? Like, it's exciting. It's really fun.
It is exciting. That's awesome. I love that. Well, are you up for some questions?
Yeah.
I feel like we have a few. Let me scroll down and see. 19. So we might not be able to get through them all, but in 18 minutes, we'll try. All right. These are some good questions too. So Hannah asks, what are some uncommon ways to differentiate yourself from other brands? Uncommon ways.
So I do have an example for this one. I knew a designer way back who took personal branding so seriously, down to like what they would wear every day, how their house was decorated. I mean, their entire life was around their brand. But I mean, I will say, like, it was maybe a little extreme, but it created this consistency in their life and their interactions. And like, for instance, Ashlyn Carter, who she's Ashlyn Wright, she's incredible, but she talks a lot about, copywriting as it relates to branding and visuals. I know you've said it before, and it's a statistic that it's 90%, and copy is the other 10%. And copy can be a great way to bring a lot of recognition that just goes that extra little step.
Yes. Yeah, I agree. I think it's branding too. You think often of the logo and patterns and icons and that sort of thing. Photos can make a huge difference. I know the hardest projects I've worked on are especially for websites. If my clients don't have images for me to use that go along with the whole brand, the final product falls short.
Yeah.
And it's the best results are from clients who have photos professionally taken, have someone on their team.
Yeah.
They can take the photos and they look gorgeous, but it really goes such a long way.
And I will say, and a lot of people might not agree with me, but there are times that I need photos and I'm not able to take them or get them made in time. And I have one photographer on a stock photography site that I only pull photos from them. So even like when I'm like on crunch and she's my style, she's actually like would be my ideal client. And it totally, like, consistency wise, it's seamless. And so that's kind of helped when I am in a bind, I just stick with one photographer, even if it's stock. I just stick with one.
That's really good because I feel like that's the hang up I have with stock photography is clients will pull from a bunch of different sites and it won't look consistent. But if it's one stock photographer, that's really smart. I like that one. That's good. I'm trying to think of other unconventional ways. I think even the way that you name like your tone and terminology. So the things that you name your products can have a huge impact on your brand. If you think about Apple with iMac, iPhone, iPad, MacBook, they've kind of created their own language. So that's a way to be distinct.
Way to do it. I do this because I'm obsessed with magazines, which I've talked about probably a million times already.
Right.
I got one magazine that really represented my male client, ideal client, and one magazine that really represented my female client, and I subscribe to both. And I circle words and phrases out of those that I can repurpose. And it helps a lot.
I love that. And I love that you said that too, because that's an action step in an upcoming brand challenge. So it's just right in line. This is awesome. I love it. So Hannah, I hope that was helpful for you. Some uncommon ways right there. Maybe the photo one was a little common, but the other ones are good. Okay, Elaine says, if you are trying to establish a personal brand for your portfolio, where do you start when it comes to picking fonts and colors?
Man, it's hard.
I know.
I always go straight to Pinterest and start a board and start pinning a lot of random things that I know relate to the project or relate to what I'm trying to talk about. And then I look for patterns and I start editing away what doesn't feel relevant anymore until I come down to all pictures that work together really well. And usually somewhere in there, there's some type references or color references, and I use that as a starting point.
Yeah, that's what I do too with inspiration boards. It's a great visual starting point to pull together. Usually a color system starts to come in there, and I'm able to pull colors from that. And then with fonts, I look back to like brand keywords and the ideal client profile and that sort of thing to find out. And of course you need an idea of type. You need some knowledge on type to know what types of fonts to choose. Do you go serif, sans serif? Do you use a script? But I think that doing your research, I'm sure during your discovery phase too, helps you kind of know what colors and fonts would be fitting. Totally.
And it's a process. I mean, we go through a couple color stories and a couple type stories and have to go back. Because sometimes like 3 will kind of work and then 1 will really work. And it takes a second to
right. Yeah. Editing through colors and secondary colors. All of that. Elaine, stay tuned because in a couple weeks we'll be covering exactly that in the brand challenge. Albie asks, now that social media plays a huge part in branding, how do you go about creating a visual identity on sites like Instagram beyond having your logo as your avatar?
That's a good one. I like these questions. So that's a great place for assets to come in. And for those of y'all who aren't familiar with the term assets, it's just like the icons or patterns or illustrations or any complementing visual that goes alongside your logo, even color palette. Color palette's huge for social media. Editing your photos in a similar way that all goes along with whether or not your brand has a lot of pattern and ornate visual stimulation, or if there's a lot of white space and breathing room, like compositionally you'll kind of want to mimic that in your photography. But then also, like every now and then I'll throw up a quote with one of our brand patterns as just a way to further kind of develop that brand story or that brand identity on social media that kind of a little bit more robust, I guess.
Yeah. I think like visually you can mimic your, like you said, colors, incorporating the same colors in your images, or I always shoot for white space with pops of color because that goes along with my website. But also something that you can do, Albie, is think about your the tone and terminology in your description. So whether it's your pin description or on Instagram, the caption, there's just as much branding there as in the visual side of it.
Yeah.
And that's what's going to pull someone in. Yeah.
Content's huge. I think it's Jenna Kutcher that actually has like a little freebie download about Instagram that might be perfect for everybody. But it even talks about having categories of content that relate to what's important to your brand, like your brand values. And I never thought of it that way, but it's really helped.
Yeah, she is the Instagram pro, so that is a good guide. Yeah, so colors, composition, and the copy that you use in captions are great ways to brand social media. Good question. Camilla asks, how much of you, personal style / preferences, should be translated into your business brand? I understand the need to design brand to a target audience, but what if you identify yourself with that said audience? Too tricky? Another good question.
If you identify yourself with your target audience, then you landed on the right target audience.
Yeah. It makes it easy to understand your target audience, hopefully. Yeah.
Like equal parts. It's a relationship. So you want to show up halfway and have them show up halfway.
Yeah. I think too that comes through. Those are the most authentic brands, I feel like, when you can really identify with your audience and their needs and it meshes together well. That's a good. I mean, I shared an example today in my Instagram stories about having a client who was working with Southern brides, or that was her ideal client. She wanted to work with Southern brides. And so I was thinking, blush, navy. I was thinking of more like Southern colors. Yes. And then she told me she wanted to use purple and teal because those were her favorite colors. And I'm like,
you're in
no.
Like in traditional Indian weddings.
It's just, we're not going to, no, we can't do that.
Yeah.
But I understood what she was saying in that she wanted her bubbly personality to be seen. So we added a secondary color that was like a pinkish purple, like it lent itself to what she was going for, but it wasn't an all-out purple and teal brand that was going to scare off her ideal client. So I feel like it's that balance between, like you said, between your ideal client and then infusing bits and pieces of yourself in there as well.
Such a sensitive one too. There's so many associations with color that are just innate to you, like culturally, and you don't want to go against those.
Yeah. No. Yeah, the purple and teal, super sweet client. And we did not go with purple and teal, and she ended up loving her brand, and it turned out great. But a little education went in there. That's a good question, Camilla. Thank you. Okay, we have time for a few more. Jackie says, when watermarking / branding photos, that are meant to be both great images as well as images with blog titles on them, what is the best way to show your business name while not creating visual clutter? Should our watermark be a brand icon, a logo, or our handle for social media accounts, or a small font for our website? This is good. So branding your blog post images and social media images. Should you have your logo? Should you have your handle? Should you have your URL? What does that look like?
I have used like all of those in different ways. Or I think this is like looking at your piece of content and being like, what's the purpose of this? So like, for instance, if it's a blog graphic that you intend to get pinned on Pinterest, well, then maybe the title of what that content is really needs to be primary, and your website of like how to find more about that topic should be at the bottom. But then if it's like announcing your business in some way, then your logo needs to be primary. So it's really just like figuring out like what's the purpose of that content, and then how much of your branding needs to be apparent, and then using your assets to either make it, and this is like design terminology, so Lauren,
I love it.
Break down if I need to, but like hierarchy, like what needs to be primary, secondary, and tertiary. Like, and a lot of times your branding needs to, and so that's when having a system really helps and making that stuff still there.
And and I'm a fan too. I don't have my logo on any of my blog post images, which I've gone back and forth on. I like the simplicity of it. My hope is that they're branded already with the colors and the fonts and the layout that people will see it and think Ellen Company even without seeing my logo on it. And usually if it's pinned, then it'll say pin, it'll have the Ellen Company logo right underneath it. If someone tries to rip it off, then that's unfortunate. But if I'm sharing posts on social media myself, like outside of blog post images, my handle is right there as well. So
yeah, I usually
I'm not
put logos on anything on like Instagram or anything like that.
Yeah. And usually if they're clicking through on a pin, they're going to land on my website anyway. So I don't know. That's my 2 cents on that. Other brand designers would be like, no, put your logo everywhere. But I think it's like Chipotle. They don't have to put their logo on the wrapper of, what is it called? Tin foil, aluminum foil wrapper on their burrito.
Second, you see some of it.
Right, exactly. So I take that stance with blog post images. That's just my 2 cents on
No,
on
I like that stance. I second Lauren.
Thank you, Kadie. I appreciate it. Good question, Jackie. All right, Catherine asks, inspiration is everywhere, and sometimes it's hard to tell what's totally original versus adapted from someone else. How do you navigate such a fine line, and how do you stay focused on your brand voice while not completely tuning out other brands? So differentiating yourself, I guess. How do you do you tell what's original?
From the perspective of a designer or a business owner. So if you're, I guess if you're, I don't know, I'm a little bit curious on that question, like knowing the fine line between how you need to stand out or who else is kind of mimicking each other or with your own clients.
Or maybe even as you're building your brand, if you're inspired by something like anthropology and using it as inspiration, but not necessarily
mimicking,
ripping it off. What's that fine line? That's how I.
Yeah. Okay. I get it now. I was like, where? I don't know. But so for our ideal client, I do get very inspired by anthropology. And then, so we have girls and guys that both come. And so I did 2 client archetypes. And then I absolutely have to pull inspiration or else it would just be too abstract. And then for the guys, the most interesting man in the world is kind of our like,
Becky's, yeah.
So when I go to those 2, I pull like what are the similarities between the 2. They're very cultured and worldly and sophisticated, a little bit older, and I start to pull patterns of like how that brand and my brand are similar. So like for anthropology, a lot of our similarities is that this woman's like very interested in other cultures and diversity and cultural influences and history. But then where we're different is that I take a much more neutral, minimalist approach, and anthropology takes a lot more color inspiration from that same foundation. So like, you know, you can both be inspired by other cultures and apply it completely different. So it's really, if you're inspired by another brand and you really want to bring it into your own, try to get down to the root of what their story is. And then see if that's the same. And if it's the same, then just apply it in a different way. But it'll still have that same feeling of like a similar message.
Yeah. And I found too, I usually tell my clients to steer clear from pinning other brands and logos to their Pinterest board that we use for inspiration, because even subconsciously it'll get stuck in my head. And I find that as a designer, it's hard to see outside of it. So if I ever feel like I'm being too heavily influenced, then I will, I'll stop following along with a certain brand for a while, or I'll get outside of, you know, the brand components and try to think more instead of colors, patterns, textures, that sort of thing, to, I don't know, to get out of that. But I like that advice for seeing the similarities between them, because I think that why component and the explanation is super important.
Totally.
So, yeah, that's really good. Great question, Catherine. All right. Oh, that was the last one, because we're coming up on the hour and I want to be respectful of Kadie's time and your time, guys. But we got through 6 of them, so we made it in. But thank you so much, Kadie. This was a lot of fun. I'm glad that you came on and shared your wisdom with us. Thank you so much.
This is just so much fun. I never get to do things like this, and it breaks up the workday. So it's a lot of fun to get to talk about something I enjoy doing so much.
Yes, and congratulations on drop cap design.
Thank you.
You had some really positive feedback in the comments section. People saying it's so beautiful. The icons are my personal favorite. I'm always drawn to icons, but really, really well done. So congratulations.
Thank you so much.
You are so welcome. And thank you all for taking the time to tune in today. I hope that you found some nuggets of wisdom in here that you can implement in your own brand for making it stand apart and be more one of a kind. Next week, we'll be talking about how to create an inspiration board. I'll be taking you through the process from start to finish that I go through, taking you behind the screen and showing you how I go about that. So I hope you join in. If you click on, I never know where it is. I think it's up in the corner. You can see my face in my profile. If you click on it, you can follow along with me on Crowdcast for future Elchats, and you can register for the upcoming Elchats there too. But thank you all. I hope that you have a great remainder of the week, and I'll see you in another Elchat soon. Bye.
Thank you guys.